Now, no one wants to admit that they feel anything but complete love for their new baby. In the weeks following birth, yes, it may be exhausting, but women are supposed to manage and naturally slip into the role of doting mother, or so we're told. But today's dilemma is from a mum who had a traumatic time in the months after giving birth to her first child. And now that she's pregnant with her second baby, she's worried that the same thing will happen again. So she wants to know how to protect herself and her child. This is a complex and challenging topic, and one that many people don't talk about, but I think it's really important for us not to shy away from it. So let's go there, shall we? Welcome to It Can't Just Be Me.
Hi, Anna.
Hey, Anna.
Hey, Anna.
Hi, Anna.
Hey, Anna.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, Anna.
It can't just be me who's really struggling with staying faithful.
I definitely got menopause brain.
I really want children, and he doesn't.
I had feelings of jealousy,
Just all around the middle, I feel like a Teletubby.
and then I hated myself for feeling that way.
If you've got any advice.
I would really appreciate any advice.
It can't just be me.
It can't just be me, right?
I'm thrilled to say that my guest this week is Jess Phillips, the MP for Birmingham Yardley and former Domestic Abuse and Safeguarding Shadow Minister. Now, if the term MP conjures up an image of a career politician in a sensible suit, dodging the difficult questions, then think again. Because Jess is known for her straight-talking, no-nonsense commitment to serving her constituents and advocating for the causes that she really cares about. As well as being a serving MP, Jess has written multiple books, hosts her own successful podcast, Yours Sincerely, and is also mum to 2 sons. She had her first baby in her early 20s, and in her signature way, she's been open and honest about how she struggled, describing motherhood as lonely and crushing at times. It's a brave thing to admit to publicly, so I just know that she's going to bring a wealth of insight to today's dilemma. Here she is. It's Jess Phillips. Jess Phillips, Queen of the Labour Party, feminist superhero, and can I just say fellow Midlander? Woohoo! Woohoo! Thank you for coming on It Can't Just Be Me. I think it's fair to say that you've had a very, very busy few months and weeks. How are you?
I'm all right, you know. People keep treating me like a little bit like I've died, and so I'm getting a lot of "Are you all right?" and I'm like that. Yeah. I just quit my front bench job. Lots of my constituents, unfortunately, do think that I've quit as an MP because it's quite confusing for people, isn't it? And so they're getting in touch with me, being like, "Oh my God, thanks so much for helping me with my daughter. Like, who's going to be our MP now?" I'm like, still me. But no, I'm all right.
I can see that you're absolutely fine. And the rest, as they say, is politics, Jess, but you're actually here today to give us your advice on a dilemma that's come in about the complex feelings that some new mums can have towards their child. I have to say it's one of the most sensitive ones we've had in, and as a straight-talking Brummie and mother of 2, I know that you're going to have a lot to say. But before we get into the complexity of that, each week I invite my guests to share their very own It Can't Just Be Me dilemma. So come on, Phillips, what have you got for me?
Well, I thought of quite a few, but now I'm going to stick with it can't just be me who, when somebody doesn't answer the phone, calls them repeatedly. And then if they don't answer after repeated calls, namely my husband or one of my children, really they're the only people I actually ring to talk to. If they don't answer the phone after like 4 attempts, I immediately just assume that they're all dead.
Oh, right. Okay, so you're ringing people constantly, and if they don't...
Only them, really. I don't ring anybody else constantly.
Do you think they're just completely ignoring you?
I think that they don't have their phones near them because they're not obsessed with their phones in a way that I am. They're normal, old-fashioned human beings. Even my younglings don't really look at their phones very much. My husband cannot tolerate the idea of being hemmed in by anything, and he feels like his phone is like his master, and so he purposefully will just ignore it.
What kind of universe have we got going in the Phillips household? So none of your younglings, or indeed Tom, your husband, really look at their phone?
No. My elder son, a little bit more than everybody else, but no, not really. And so obviously what I'll do is I'll call my husband 4 times. If he doesn't answer, then I go to the eldest one. If he doesn't answer, then I go to the youngest one. The youngest one has never answered his phone ever in the history of ever.
You see, I'm also just getting the impression that they just don't want to talk to you. That actually...
That is also true, that they don't want to speak to me because I don't live with them. So it's an unusual family setup.
Are you actually connected in any way? Is this just a fantasy?
Maybe they don't really exist. Like one of those things where you're like, did I just invent this? The trouble is that I do ring them for really inane reasons. No reason at all, in fact, just to say hello, because I'm on my own and they're all together cracking on with their lives, and I'll ring and be like, oh, what are you doing? They're like, well, we're eating dinner, Jess. Like, why are you calling?
And I love the fact as well that they call you by your first name.
That's my husband, although my son Danny calls me by my first name, but he doesn't just call me by my first name. He calls me Jess Phillips MP for Birmingham Yardley because he says I don't answer to Mum. Because I ignore him when he says Mum because I'm looking at my phone.
I mean, I really could talk about this all day, and we do have a psychotherapist in the room, and we'll pass her number on to you later. But let's just gently redirect us to the task in hand. And to help us both out with today's dilemma, we have super psychotherapist Sam Pennells-Nkolo with us here in the studio. Sam, hello. I can see you giggling away.
Hi everyone, it's a pleasure as always.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You're looking good, Sam. You're looking good. Are you concerned by Jess's psyche?
No, not at all.
Do you think that I'm suffering from anxiety? I mean, and by that I mean I literally am suffering from anxiety because I take medication for it.
I think we all are.
Okay,
I think
good.
we all are.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
Okay. On a serious note, before I play this problem out, I just want to reiterate that if something comes up in this episode that sounds familiar to you or is triggering, then we would urge you to go to your GP for support. Sam is, of course, a registered psychotherapist, but nothing can replace a face-to-face appointment with a qualified professional. We've put some links to resources in the show notes, so please do reach out for support if you need it. Okay. Sam and Jess, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is from Tiffany.
So I'm 16 weeks pregnant with my second child. Both of the pregnancies have been very planned and wanted, but when I gave birth to my 3-year-old son, it was just under Corona and things were incredibly stressful. I'm self-employed and work in the same firm as my partner, and our employee went off sick 10 days before I gave birth, so we were pretty much on our own with only 2 days of paternity leave, my partner, and otherwise stuck with a baby who didn't put on weight and didn't ever sleep. And I was obviously both upset and teary and not feeling very happy, but the level of rage that I felt is not something that I've experienced before. Every time that he refused to sleep, I got so angry and could shout at him and hate myself. And whilst all of that is luckily behind me, both because he started to sleep and also he's looked after full time, so I was able to return to work and become myself again. But I worry that I'm going to get into the same mental state as I was when I gave birth to my first son. I don't want to get so angry. I want to try to be able to enjoy that baby bubble and just accept that it's hard to have kids and it's hard to not sleep properly. So I guess my question is, how do you prepare for your second child when your experience with your first child was not exactly what you'd anticipated it being, and sort of enable yourself to start afresh, as it were, when you're also plagued by horrible memories of your own behaviour and how it all went tits up?
Well, I mean, this just sounds absolutely horrific, and I know that it's something that other parents listening may well identify with. Just so you know, we did reach out to Tiffany after receiving this, and she told us that she is now getting support from her GP. Jess, you've spoken publicly about how you struggled after the birth of your first son. Can you just walk us through that period in your life and how you felt?
I was quite young. I'd only been going out with my now husband, then boyfriend, for 3 weeks when I found out that I was pregnant.
No.
Yeah.
So you'd been basically, it was that we've just met, we're really
we
going...
hadn't just met, we'd known each other for years, but we'd only been together for about 3 weeks when I got pregnant, which if he were here, he'd say, you told me you couldn't have kids. But that's what I was told because I had endometriosis.
Oh, wow. So that was a complete surprise to you.
A complete shocker. And because I thought that it might be the only chance for me to have a baby, I was like, well, I'm going to have this baby. Although I did pretend to go through the motions of making a decision. But every single time I found out that I was pregnant, I know the second the little lines appear exactly what I'm going to do about it. And I've made various different decisions. But I've known the second, and I knew when I found out I was pregnant with Harry, that I would keep him. But I was, I didn't know anybody who had a baby. My husband and my then boyfriend, he definitely was like not as sure as me about it. We lived in like essentially a sort of squalid share house, and I'd only moved in because I'd been evicted. We'd lived together for like a week, and then I found out I was pregnant. But then once we made the decision, I had no expectations, and I actually think that no expectations is better in lots of regards. But now when I talk to people about having their first baby, I say to them, and it's not very, obviously I say congratulations, not that brutal. First thing I do is I tell them that after you give birth, you pass clots that are so big that you think your liver's fallen out. I genuinely thought that I was dying. I was in a hospital bathroom having given birth to my son, and it was very traumatic labour. I'd tried to have him at home, and it had taken 24 hours. I'd ended up in surgery with a spinal block.
Oh my God.
Like, it was all very, very traumatic. And my mum was there, and she'd like had 4 kids, like shelling peas, and I felt like a failure for having to have interventions. But I remember being in this little toilet cubicle, because they don't let you leave the hospital till you've done 2 wees or something, to basically make sure you're functioning properly. I don't think that happens now. I think they just sling you out right out. But back when I had my kids, and you pass, and so you have to wee into a bowl, because you have to then prove to them, like you're a child, that you've done a wee. I passed into it. What I thought was my liver falling out of my, clots that big, and I thought I was going to die. And it was so frightening, and no one had told me that would happen. So I tell women who are pregnant with their first babies not to be frightened, that it's totally normal. The second thing I say is that the first 8 weeks of your first baby's life are the worst 8 weeks of your life.
Really?
Yeah, just harrowing change of culture that you are not at all prepared for. No book you have read. No, there is nothing that can prepare you. But after 8 weeks, it's not that things get better or that your baby sleeps through the night, and that everybody who tells you that is the case is lying to you because they've forgotten. Your mum and dad will tell you that when you were little, you were eating from 8 weeks and sleeping through the night, just because they're old and they've forgotten. But after 8 weeks, your standards just drop, and you've adapted to the culture of having a baby. And so you think a good time is 20 minutes of peace.
Really?
Yeah, you get really low standards about... I remember once when my second son was tiny and my elder son was 3, to Stratford-upon-Avon, and in the pissing rain, and everybody cried, including me, and we're on this boat on the river. And when we got back in the car, we all went, that was a lovely day. And I think our standards are low now.
Is that what happens?
Yeah, it's miserable having small children. And nobody... The thing is, to the point of this brilliant woman, she's not in an alternative situation. She's in a regular situation. She's in the same situation. I cannot tell you the amount of times I stood over my son's cot and called him a twat.
Really?
Yes. And then I sort of started just to turn on my husband, because...
And then he's a twat as well.
He's a twat in the middle of the night. Everybody's a twat, and all there is people who are like... I mean, I used to try and say it in a calm voice because I wanted him to go to sleep. Like, why? He's such a dickhead. Go to bed. Everybody feels that way. My son is not in any way damaged by... I mean, he calls me a twat quite a lot, so maybe...
In a calm voice.
In a calm voice.
But did you feel that immediate love?
No. Second time round, I did. This is probably, something to hold on to when having your second baby. I didn't know how to feel it. I'd never experienced that love. And the moment my son was born, I thought I had been frightened before, but I'd never experienced fear before. I'd been in frightening situations, but the genuine existential fear that you had to get somebody to stay alive till the end of the day. A good day when you have a newborn baby is nobody died. That's the level. Nobody died today. I remember it was in a week after in Sainsbury's. I was pushing him round the buggy in Sainsbury's in King's Heath, where we live, and I had this sort of epiphany that I had a baby. And it was a week after, well, it was a week after we came out of the hospital, because I was in hospital for a week after he was born. And so 2 weeks after he was born, and I remember just being like, oh my God, I've got a baby. And I loved him very much. And I sort of hysterically laughing, crying in the aisles at Sainsbury's. I remember it so vividly. I remember that I bought Bavarian smoked cheese.
Oh, I love a bit of smoked cheese, though. And were you wandering down let's just have the reality, a bit more of the reality of having a newborn. Actually, I'll come to you, Sam. Tell us about, I've not had children. I have been pregnant. I understand the emotional and hormonal disruption. But tell us about this anger and frustration that Tiffany is feeling. Is it hormones? Is it sleep deprivation? Or is there something else at play as well?
I mean, I think it's all of the above. And depending on our personality type, you either suppress that anger, you express the anger, you have to find a way to manage it or move through it. But I've not yet met a woman who's had a child when she speaks honestly that says she hasn't felt it. Mum rage is a real thing.
I love that mum rage.
Mum rage is a real thing.
What is the mum rage, though? Do you think? I mean, Jess, what do you think?
Part of it is going to be hormones because, like when you're getting your period because you're crying at the OXO advert. So some of it is that. I remember when my second son was born, I was in hospital for about a week and a half afterwards, and it was in that week Barack Obama became the president of the United States, and I was watching it on the television in my little cubicle thing, and I was crying because it was very emotional. And then the midwife came in and started talking to me about whether I was depressed. I was like, no, it's Barack Obama. And she was like, what? I was like, anyway. So have you
told Barack Obama this story? I feel like you need to email him.
There is a lot of teariness and a lot of emotion, and that makes you tired. Also, you're grim. Like on your worst day, when you're feeling a bit down, you feel like your clothes are cutting into you. And you feel like it hurts, like you feel physical pain at your physical form because you're miserable. And it usually in women comes out in fatness, like a fear of fatness. You're also, you're soaked through with both sweat and milk, and you're bleeding absolutely loads. So there is so much going on, both physically and hormonally. And at the same time, you feel judged. Like women, the second you evacuate your womb of a baby, you feel guilt and fear in a way that you have never felt it before.
Why guilt?
Because women are trained from birth to basically feel like everything is their responsibility. So the sort of patriarchal norms. And you are trying to not just keep up with the Joneses, but, I was 22, so maybe this is, specifically to me. Like I felt like people thought I was a gym slip mum and I didn't know what I was doing. And I felt judged by healthcare professionals without them doing anything to judge me necessarily. I still felt it. And so all of that going on, and then adds literally something that we do to people in torture to deprive them of sleep. And even when your baby is asleep, people say really glib things like, when your baby sleeps, you should sleep. And it's I've got to do the bloody washing. And also, I'd like to just exist without this baby for a second. So you don't sleep, you don't do that. And the sleep deprivation will drive you mad. In the middle of the night, the best advice I can ever give to anybody, and I still think this about when I wake up all through the night anxious, is that things that matter at 3 o'clock in the morning never matter by 9 a.m. Like they've gone, they're an illusion.
Sam, according to the NHS, more than 1 in 10 women experience postnatal depression within a year of giving birth. At what point does the stress of being a new parent become postnatal depression, or more seriously, puerperal psychosis?
This is a difficult one because they say, whoever they are, that come 10 days, so it's natural and normal for 2 weeks. Again, and I think these timelines are really unrealistic, but they say that okay, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, if you know, baby blues, that's what's referred to as the baby blues. You feel a bit low, a bit depressed. Well, depressed, again, I don't like the labels, but okay, you're not sleeping. Of course, anyone would feel flat and low. Once it gets to, let's say, a month and you still feel like that, you maybe can't go out, you start feeling highly anxious. Things before that you would find easy, like going to the shops or meeting your friends, you're becoming reclusive, you're starting to isolate yourself. If that keeps going on, then we'd start to look at, okay, are you experiencing postnatal depression? And I think it's important to say experiencing postnatal depression. I don't think it's a fixed state. And then the idea that we can move through it, we can work with it. And often women will say, I just don't feel like myself, but for very extended periods of time, they don't want to see their friends, they don't want to talk to anybody, they don't want to go out, whereas before they might have been very different. So I suppose it's at that point that we'd look at, okay, are you experiencing postnatal depression? If we're going into psychosis, we're looking at possible delusions, having sort of almost personality distortions where family and friends will say, okay, this is not how I experience my loved one at all.
And what should people do, Sam, if they're worried? If as a mother or as somebody that, you know, is connected to a new mother is worried about how they're feeling or their behaviour, what should they do?
I mean, the first thing, this is difficult, is if you're feeling like this, to try to talk to somebody. So if you have a partner, if you have friends, if you can't do that, again, go to see your GP. And I'd always say go to see your GP anyway, if you're feeling off. But that idea of trying to connect with people is a difficult thing to do when you're feeling judged, isolated, alone, worried about what people are going to think about you.
You've got to get your boob out
every minute.
It's not every 4 hours.
No.
It's 4 hours on, 20 minutes off.
Yeah.
No matter what they tell you.
Yeah. It's really difficult, that idea of trying to connect with people, trying to just say, I'm having a difficult time. Be honest about how you're feeling, which so many women are not.
But do you think that a woman should go straight to her GP or her health worker? What should happen?
I would say that's the first thing. So if you're feeling a little bit off, it doesn't have to be biologically. Go to see your GP, have a conversation, see what they think, and as well as trying to connect with people that are close with you, trying to get that support. So you're not just going to one person, okay, go see my GP, because a lot of women will say to me, I've gone to see my GP and I found, okay, what else do I do? So that's our number one, go to see the GP, and then try to just be honest about how you're feeling. Which is actually quite hard for a lot of women to do.
But there's also, I think, that desperation, isn't there? Obviously, we've discussed postnatal depression, but what if it tips over into puerperal psychosis? What should people be doing in that situation?
The moment that happens, or it's very difficult to identify within oneself, go to the doctors, go to the GP, tell your close friends. It's very difficult. Close friends and family will probably notice it because there's a marked difference in terms of character, in terms of how you experience that person, but straight to the GP as soon as you can.
Yeah. And Tiffany also speaks about being plagued by horrible memories of her behaviour towards her first child. I think we can all relate to that idea of feeling the guilt and the remorse of just being vile and, why did I behave that way? Sam, what tips can you give that might help Tiffany to let go of those anxious thoughts and guilt that I'm going to do this again, I'm going to do this again?
Well, I think it's really important, particularly if this is her second child, that there's always going to be things that come up. You shout at your child and think, oh God, I'm such a bad mum, I feel so guilty. It's about the repair. So it's about the idea of I can repair, I can make it better. I can go and say, I'm really sorry for shouting, mummy was angry. And that idea of thinking that if you've done it once, you can do it again. And it doesn't have to be the same thing, but it's almost like we're prepared. You know what's coming now. It's different. Again, that idea of having no expectations with your first child. Now, the problem is when you've had a traumatic or difficult birth or experience of being a mother the first time, you automatically think it's going to happen again. Again, as you said, it's going to happen again, it's going to happen again. And often I'll say to people, okay, in that moment of anxious thought, which we all go through, is there an alternative? So instead of our feeling brain, where it's like it's going to happen again, I can feel it, the dread, a lot of women talk about dreading it. Try and ask yourself cognitively, is there another alternative? Is there a way that it might not be exactly the same? Because it probably won't. But again, I'm talking about taking away the emotion in a way and going, well, it might be different. There might be ways that I won't be the same. So you're giving yourself a bit of space from the anxious thought.
And the option as well of, do you know what? It may not be as bad. It might be better. It might
definitely
be better. Sam, does having postnatal depression with one child make you more likely to have it with the next one?
The research supports that you are more likely to experience feelings that you had before. That does not mean that you can't work with it. And that does not mean that you will have it. I've worked with women who've had postnatal depression with their first child, second child, not necessarily so. So I think it's different. It's case to case, on a case to case basis. But just to be prepared that if you have experienced that, put things in place before the baby arrives so that you know you've got a system to work with. That can be really helpful.
So just Tiffany talked about returning to work and how that helped her to become herself again first time round. What helped you to feel yourself again after your boys?
Definitely going to work.
Really?
Definitely. I think that just a massive shout out to women who stay off work and look after their children. I would say the level of expectation on your partner is quite important as well. And I watch quite a lot of women act as if they do everything and sort of gatekeep it a little bit. Like, my husband has always been my children's primary carer because he worked a 4-on, 4-off night shift when they were born. And so he was up in the night anyway. If only he could lactate. Honestly, if people could just evolve, that would have been considerably better. But my husband lived in the night time because he was a night shift worker when my children were born. And so even when I was in a desperate situation in the night breastfeeding, he was sat next to me talking to me.
That's very interesting. I mean, you're nodding, Sam. Does that make sense to you? Do you hear this in your therapy rooms?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, saying, well, he just doesn't do it like I do it, but I want him to do more. And it's like, well, if you're going to kind of tell him off for not doing it how you do it, then he's just not going to do it.
Yeah. Let's leave Tiffany with some concrete advice. She asks, how do you prepare for your second child when your experience with your first one went tits up? So we've touched on this a little bit, but I'm thinking straight away support network. So Sam, what should Tiffany put in place now? Because clearly she's anxious about having a second baby.
I mean, I would lean on that support network. Any mum that she knows, anyone on the school run, everybody, anybody. In a way, it doesn't matter who they are. If you've got a network, you feel safer. And that idea of being able to feel like, I'm anxious, being able to say it to numerous people eases the stress. So that's number one, get that support network in. Know what your day is going to look like. I think routine's a good one. Getting out, making sure that every day, even though you don't want to go to that soft play that smells, you go and you get there.
Take a bottle of wine. We used to drink it out of the little IKEA kiddie cups.
There you go. That network is invaluable. It's something you can't, connection is the biggest thing that we struggle with. Don't look at the apps. Don't look at the leaps here and there. You know what's best for your baby. That we don't need these things. It's the idea of just intuitively what works for you. And if you are happier, your baby will be happier. Everyone's happier.
So Jess, 3 tips. Concrete advice for Tiffany? What would you say?
Yeah, I would say definitely trust your instincts, consider it. Expect nothing. Like, you're giving birth to a human being. My children are exactly the characters they were the day they were born as they are today. They are exactly the same. Now, if you're expecting to give, birth to a battery hen that will behave, it's a human being. It has its own character. Sort of live with the fact that it has its own character and let yourself off the hook. Give yourself a break. I've got one that's an absolute pain in the arse, literally. I tore all the way down. It's characterful, and I have one that's really thoughtful and considered. You get what you get, and you should just cut yourself some slack because some of them are harder than others. But yeah, I cannot stress enough that getting out with your mates and making mates, and even if you don't particularly like the people, it gives you conversations with your husband when they get back from work to slag them off. It's basically content. You're providing content that isn't just about the baby, because for 4 solid years the only things me and my husband talked about was the children or the other mums that we were slagging off the way that they were doing it. Mums and dads. So I can't stress enough how important it is that, NCT and all that, I think it's probably nonsense because nobody's birth goes the way that it does. But the thing it does provide people is a network of people who are having a child at the same time.
Jess, Sam, thank you so much for giving such honest, unfiltered, considered advice on this. I really do appreciate it. And Tiffany, I hope that this has been helpful for you. All of the team here are wishing you and your partner a much easier time with your new baby. And, you know, like the girl said, you get what you get. You've been there before. You're going to be better prepared this time. And just because you had a traumatic time first time doesn't mean that that's going to happen again. And we hope that it doesn't. Now, as Sam well knows, I'm not done with you yet because we have a final quickfire dilemma to put to you both. This one is about work-life balance and it's from Neve. Here goes.
Hi Anna. I found my dream job. I love what I do and I've worked really hard to get here. But I'm finding it hard to strike the right balance between my working life and personal life. Do you have any tips on good habits for boundary setting and work-life balance?
Oh man, work-life balance, boundaries. I mean, Jess is basically shaking her head. I imagine that you have no work-life balance as a mother and also a politician. So how do you manage it?
I mean, I never, ever have a balance. After COVID, I felt like there was too much life in the balance. I was a bit like, I have watched everything on Netflix. I've completed the internet. Because I'm so used to having to travel around, and when I didn't have to do that, the amount of time, and then I just sort of got used to it. But I just think it goes in waves. I'm either working absolutely like a dog and hours upon hours upon hours upon hours, and I feel knackered. And I can't be bothered to go out at the weekend, and people's merriment sort of irritates me.
Damn those happy people.
Yeah, I'm like that. Oh, you're just so drunk. You know, when you're not really drunk around drunk people, that is the worst.
It's probably usually me.
Yeah, I mean, and then it makes me think I must be intolerable when I'm really drunk. And then I go through periods where I'm really, really sociable, have much more of a life, do loads of like cultural activities with my husband. As my children are older now as well, they literally require almost nothing of me apart from money. But I've never, ever got it to be the point where I have like this much work and it's going. My husband does. My husband he's works on the tools. In a very unionised workforce, and he thinks like the second that 5 o'clock comes, that you put down your
tools down,
and if somebody wishes you to pick that tool up again, they'll be paying you double bubble. Like that is like he gets like if somebody calls him out of work, he has like an on-call rate. I used to be working in a women's refuge at the same time as he had those jobs, and I'd be there like sewing the curtains for a new family to come in at like 11 and be like, I'll be home later, and being paid half the amount that he was being paid. And he'd be like, you're an absolute mug.
You're a fool
woman.
to yourself.
You're a mug. Put your tools down and crack on home. And he works to live. If you're the kind of person who's worked their way up to get their dream job, give in to the idea that you're ever going to have a work-life balance. Sometimes you're going to have nice times. Other times you're just going to work like a dog.
You see, I can completely identify with that as, you know, having worked in broadcasting since I was sort of, 22, that there is no work-life balance. I mean, Sam, you're nodding sagely here, going, oh, God. So what would you be saying to Neve here? How do we get those boundaries in place for work-life balance? Or is it just a constant battle?
I think it's a constant battle, and I think we have to put our own boundaries up when we think, okay, what's my life about? What's my day about? What's important for me? And I don't think that's the same for everybody. And I totally agree with Jess. I think this idea of balance and boundaries, all these words, they're great, but in practice, they don't work. We have to kind of go with, again, instinct and know, well, this is important for me. And I want to be able to, let's say, see my children this evening. Maybe tomorrow I can't because I've got to go to work. And we have to find a way to come to terms with that. Because that idea of it being completely balanced and boundaries, I've not experienced it to be reality.
Well, now that we're on a bit of a rant, right, because I'm really shit at answering my emails and my WhatsApps and my texts and my phone calls.
That's fine.
And well, this is it. But I feel like I'm an absolute failure compared to everybody else. It's like, you've not come back to me. And I'm like, just because there's loads and I sort of can't be bothered, and I'm kind of,
I have a reply that says if I haven't got back to you within 10 days, that's regular.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have to
Oh.
have it for my constituents because...
In fairness, you do have constituents. I've just got just me and, like, you know, my dog. So I haven't got constituents. Have I got a, you know,
You
an
haven't got
excuse?
120,000 people who email you every day about things like, you know, that they've found a rare spider. Genuinely, people write really weird emails to me. But yeah, but I think that's okay to say, like, I'll get back to you. Like,
Within 10 days.
well,
I've
I
got to
don't
try that.
think you need to be prescriptive. It's just like, people should just expect people to get back to them when they can. And don't assume bad faith. So much assumption of bad faith in the world. It's like, oh, she's not got back to my WhatsApp and she thinks she's annoyed with me. And it's just like, no, she's
I am
probably
now.
in the bath. Like, whatever, like, get over yourselves. I have to say, I find the boundary setting to be a bit patronising in a way that we didn't used to call it that. We called it a shift pattern. And I feel like it's become a bit performative. I try, because of my work-life balance, I try and say I will never... I used to be like, I will never work on a Thursday evening and I'll never work on a Sunday. Those are the days, apart from Remembrance Sunday, obviously. But if it doesn't work out like that, like...
Does it matter?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, don't lose sleep about it. But yeah, if you're happy and functioning, doesn't matter if you're going to work all the time.
So, Sam, what are we saying here about the work-life balance and boundaries?
I think we have to do what works for us. Whatever works for you. As just said, if you're happy and you're content, that's it. We all have to work within our own boundaries, whatever that means for us, and not be forced or funneled into this idea of what we should be doing. Because we should be doing this, we should be doing that. Actually, you decide for yourself what works. That's it.
Jess, thank you so much for coming into the studio today in person. I'm aware of how in demand you are, even though your kids are ignoring you. So truly, we're very grateful for the time that you've given us.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a total pleasure.
And Sam, as always, it's a joy to see you and to get your sage advice. We literally hang off your every word. Thank you.
You're very kind. Thank you.
I'll be back next week with a new episode of It Can't Just Be Me. In the meantime, if you find yourself with a dilemma and really need some advice, then please send me a voice note at itcan'tjustbeme.co.uk, or you can email your dilemma to itcan'tjustbeme@podimo.com. And if once a week just isn't enough for you, and let's face it, it isn't, remember you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube and Facebook. Just search for It Can't Just Be Me. Because whatever you're dealing with, I promise you, it really isn't just you. From Podimo and Mags, this has been It Can't Just Be Me, hosted by me, Anna Richardson. The producers are Laura Williams and Christy Calloway-Gale. The executive producer for Mags is James Norman Fife, and the executive producers for Podimo are Jake Chudnow and Matt White. The editor is Palama Kaufman. Don't forget to follow the show, or for early access to episodes and to listen ad-free, subscribe to Podimo UK on Apple Podcasts.